Greetings. We look again at the ideas that surrounded Easter. Ideas, yes, but events. The events that followed the Last Supper are quite interesting. Towards the end of the record of the Last Supper, the Lord Jesus says to Judas Iscariot, "What you must do quickly." And that marked the beginning and putting in motion of the league of God's enemies trying to put out the life of his son. And so there is Judas Iscariot, goes over to the high priests of the time and requests of them that he may be accompanied by those who would go and arrest the Lord Jesus. Jesus, in the meantime, leaves the upper room and goes to Gethsemane. Judas, knowing where he would go in order to pray, has set himself up as to how he would go and engage the leadership. So, the Lord Jesus arrives at Gethsemane and he sets aside his disciple and goes further with James, John, and Peter. And even those, he says, stay here and pray. And as he goes alone, he goes into a space that is dark, where he cannot see. He goes in a space where he is lonely, because when he returns to the disciples, they're asleep. So they're not praying with him, they're sleeping. And the loneliness is consuming. But he also goes into a space where he is very much aware of a humanity forcing its way into breaking his short life of 33 years. Yes, the scribes, the Pharisees that led the Jewish community of the time, the Roman soldiers that would accompany them to arrests, even the very trials that he would face the next day. All of these were impacting his time in Gethsemane as he prayed to the Father, where huge drops of blood were released from his temples as he prayed. What has this to do with you and me? Well, it is the anticipation, not so much of these events and these forces, but the anticipation of God looking away. That was the greatest matter that was contained in Jesus' prayer. He would say to the Father, "Take this cup away from me." And what is that cup? It is the suffering that the Father would inflict on his Son on your behalf and on my behalf for the sins that we have committed. What great sinners we are. On many occasions, we want to pretend we are not sinners. We want to imagine that the sins that we have done are but little sins, when in actual fact, God the Father, who is a holy God, who sees penetrating into our very hearts and minds, and looks back without loss of memory, knowing all that we have done wrong, takes record. And for all of that, imagine this, all of that and much more, sins of the future, sins that we carry out. Jesus is praying, "Lord, take this cup away from me," but qualifies it, "Not my will, but yours be done." What is he saying? He's basically saying that this is a very painful thing to go through. And if it were possible for it to be done without me going through it, then let it be done. But that darkness, those people conniving against him, the very loneliness that he experienced in the absence of his very own disciples, all of that mattered not. What mattered most to him was that God's will be done. And God's will was done. Because consequently, Jesus would be alone. And the Father would turn his face away from him. And Jesus could see that for the future. And that following day, he was to shout, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My Father, why, my God, have you forsaken me? He was forsaken for you and for me, to buy us back, to justify a relationship between ourselves and God as a substitute, a vicarious substitute, so that God would look upon us with a smile, in spite of all our sin, because it would have been paid for even by the life of the Lord Jesus.